everybody. Fan Culture Podcast, episode 38. Thank you guys for tuning in again. We got Brandon, we got Karl here. Hopefully we get Sakani on. How y'all feeling?
Feeling good, man.
We're good.
What's up? What's up? So, a lot of big NBA news. We'll get into that. Obviously, the biggest issue being the boycott that we saw basically over the past 2 days as far as postponing NBA games. So, we'll get plenty of reaction on that. Let's start with unveiling our NBA top 10 players, because we actually had some conversations over the weekend where I made the comment that I think Luka could be arguably in people's top 10. And, you know, we kind of had our opinions on that. So let's unveil our top 10s. Who wants to go with their top 10 first?
Laker fan.
I'll say,
Y'all number one in the West, so you got to go first.
Yeah, neither one of our teams are in the playoffs, so you got to go.
all right.
And it's got to be in order.
I didn't put it in order.
Nah,
All right,
I got it in order, man.
All right, I'll go then because I had mine in order. I was telling Karl about it already. All right, so my top 10, number one, I still got to go Braun. I mean, he's playing at an MVP level, so I'm going to go Braun 1. 2, although he wasn't on the court this season, KD. I'm just going off of what we've seen. We don't know how he's going to come back next year, but based off what we've seen, he's number 2, player in the world right now. 3 and 4 is a toss-up for me. I'm gonna give it to Giannis though, the likely back-to-back NBA MVP. I'm gonna give it to Giannis at 3. Kawhi, I'm gonna go number 4. I still got Steph in my top 5, so I'm gonna go Steph at number 5. James Harden 6, 7 AD, 8. I got the newcomer. I got Luka at number 8. Even with the short resume, just what he's done so far is things we've never seen anybody else do before. So that was Luka at 8. 9, I'm gonna go Dame. Dame and Luka are probably interchangeable at this point, but I'm gonna go Dame 9. And 10, I'm gonna wrap up with Russell Westbrook. 10, 11, 12 are kind of toss-ups as well, but I'll say Russ off of his play this year as well has secured that 10th spot. So yeah, that's my top 10 in order.
Guess we just doing this backwards then.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm sure. Honestly, I feel like it's only fair, and it's not just based on the accolade. I have other reasons why, but I'm gonna go with Giannis number 1 in the NBA right now. Not just because of what he does offensively, also because of what he does defensively, and because when you look at the other players that might be in my top 5, I feel like he can have the most success with the worst running mate or the worst, co-star.
Supporting cast, co-star.
Yeah, like just with Chris Middleton. I'm not a huge fan. I know he's been an all-star. I feel like he can be replaced any year that he has been with someone who wasn't. But I'm definitely going with Giannis number 1. I'll place LeBron 2. I agree with what you said about Kevin Durant and just kind of picking up where he left off the last that I saw him. But as for right now, I feel like, what he did with Russell Westbrook, what he did with Steph, what he did with Clay, I see Giannis doing the same thing in terms of being, he didn't win a championship yet, but I'm just talking about like regular season success, winning the MVP, being number 1 in your conference, and he doesn't have the same cast that Kevin Durant has had. So I'll place Kevin Durant at 3. I'll go Kawhi Leonard at 4. At 5, I would actually place James Harden. I feel like he's a little bit better than Steph Curry. I feel like for a long time he's been a little underrated defensively. I feel like people are starting to see him perform better defensively. It's something I believe he's always had. He's just feeling a little more of a need and urgency to display it, especially in moments where it's absolutely needed. The fact that he can rebound and facilitate and score all on a nightly basis more consistently than Steph Curry, I would give him 5. I'll put Curry at 6. I'll agree with Anthony Davis at 7, which kind of at this point is really just purely based on talent because he hasn't done much as the number 1 guy. But I'll definitely put him there. Honestly, when I go down the list, I like Luka at 8 as well. I definitely cannot leave Damian Lillard out of my top 10. I like him at 9, but rounding off my top 10, I'll actually go with Joel Embiid. I feel like it's another Anthony Davis type, just based on pure talent, to be that big and to be that good at so many things on the court. I'll have to place him at number 10 on my list.
That's solid. That's real solid. All right, Brandon. You have plenty of time to do ranking now. So, what you got?
Mine is low-key similar to yours. Um, just when you get into like 5, 6, 7, like that's when it starts to get like a little bit more closer. And to me, I feel like right now, if we're doing solely based off like what we've seen in the NBA, it's hard because not everybody's playing right now, and that's always the case. But best player I would say would be LeBron James. You know, especially what he's doing in year 17. Giannis would be 2 for sure. Uh, I just feel like what we've seen him so far, we haven't seen him in any finals. We haven't seen him in any finals. We haven't seen him like, I mean, we've seen him in the playoffs, I believe, but we haven't seen him in any finals. So I think like it's crazy to think like his ceiling is, you know, where it could be in the next 4 to 5 years. But yeah, I think he definitely has a very high ceiling. KD, whenever KD is healthy, that's my number 3. Whenever he's healthy, I feel like he is on a given night the best player in the world. He just plays different than LeBron. LeBron is facilitator first, but like every time I see KD, he does something that like, I'm just like, all to be doing like what you're doing. First of all, but like his skill level is on another level. Then you got see now this one would be different for me if this other the other person that like that I want to have above had rings and they don't. So Kawhi at 4, you know, get done both different teams. Um, and on a given night could be the best player or best defender, you know, in the world. I just and then 5 would be Anthony Davis. I feel like Anthony Davis is a player. You know, if you're building out your roster and you need a big man, I would start with Anthony Davis. Um, you know, 9 times out of 10 with what we have. I mean, either who else would you guys pick besides AD to start out a team? If I asked you to start out with a big man, it'd be Anthony Davis. I know, Carl, you mentioned Joel Embiid, Giannis. You know, players like that can play inside and outside. And that's a little, excuse me, I feel like it's just been those types of players to dominate the NBA that guard most positions and like play inside and outside. And then at a very close 6 position, I have Steph, best shooter ever. It's just been a while since we've got to see him play. Not that it diminishes his skill set. Um, I'm just thinking currently right now, and I guess that dropped his head just a little bit. But I mean, the championships, the scoring titles, you know, the MVPs. Everybody knows who Steph Curry is. Um, James Harden would be after Steph. Then I would have. I feel like I'm forgetting. I want to say Kyrie, but Kyrie can't stay healthy, so it's questionable. But I'd say Dame, and then 9 and 10. at 9. Then I would have I don't know who out my 10 spot with.
Hmm. I mean, Embiid wasn't a bad pick at all. Just like Carl had him in the top 10. I mean,
Right.
dude's a monster.
Contavious Caldwell Pope.
Oh, I know who I'll pick.
Kuzma.
Devin Booker.
Mm, interesting. That's an interesting pick. Um, I mean, for me personally, I'd probably put Devin Booker maybe more so top 20 than top 10. I mean, he's ascending, obviously. I mean, he's got a high ceiling, but I would give him top 20 right now. You're probably more around top 15 even. I can give that to him. But the NBA is just so deep. I mean, you got guys that great players that we didn't even mention. Brandon, you mentioned
Yeah.
Kyrie. Um, Paul George isn't on the list. Embiid made Carl's top 10, but not mine. Nikola Jokic,
Donovan Mitchell.
Booker, Donovan Mitchell,
Brandon Ingram
Jason Tatum,
with the or Ben Simmons.
Ben Simmons. Yeah. So, I mean, that just shows how deep the league is. And if we got top 20, I bet you we'd have some, way different, kind of second tier players in that bottom 10. But,
Absolutely.
the league is just so deep. It starts to get to the point where it's just kind of more so about preference. I feel like the top 5 are fairly undisputed. Top 5 or 6 are fairly undisputed. Everyone kind of has them, maybe different order, but the top 6s are the same people. And then 7, 8, 9, 10, I feel like are solidifying themselves now as well, especially with Luka already being around 8, 9 in all 3 of our lists. Who knows where he'll be in the next 2 years, which is kind of crazy to even think about. I think I mentioned Russ. Neither one of you guys mentioned Russ, so it's just crazy. It's crazy how deep the league is.
I didn't want to have the same one, and he was the first one that came to mind. But I think it's kind of, I don't know what it is about this player, but I don't hear his name come up a ton. But Kyle Lowry, so proven himself time and time again of being a top player in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, when he was a perennial, well, I guess he just recently make the All-Star. When he was kind of at his top of his prime with, DeRozan, I remember a lot of people kind of considering him, top 15, at the time. I think now it's just kind of, yes, we know who Kyle Lowry is. We don't expect him to be, the best player on a championship team. Even if the Raptors were to win it this year, he's not the best player on the team. That's Pascal Siakam, another guy who could potentially be a top 15, top 20 player. So
I think it's difficult because you have the players individual, and but also how they play with players. I mean, or just like as a team. I don't know. I side more so on like the individual. Exactly. Like, I mean, if you were doing this, if they were playing 1-on-1, like, is that fair or is that not fair?
I would say that's not fair because, I mean, okay, you got Dame versus Joel Embiid 1-on-1. Whoever wins gets a higher ranking. That ain't right,
Like Giannis versus Kyrie. That's not fair at all.
Yeah. And I mean, and even when you talk about like number 1, 2, 3, is KD's probably going to beat LeBron 1-on-1 if we're being honest, but that doesn't necessarily make him the better player.
I remember seeing something. I can't remember which player it was, but it might have been Mario Chalmers making a comment about how when he was on the Heat, Michael Beasley used to beat LeBron James in 1-on-1 games in practice all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody is gonna say Michael Beasley was better than LeBron.
Yeah, it's
1-on-1
tough
only
because
goes so far. Like I had a conversation the other day on Facebook. I made a joke to somebody about how he has Kobe Bryant in his all-time top 5. So they asked me about my top 5, and I gave them my list. And some guy replied saying Kareem couldn't mess with Shaq. Same thing. One-on-one has nothing to do with an all-time ranking. This isn't the most talented or who would win one-on-one. Just who you are as an individual, not necessarily matching up and playing against, but how you and your talent matches up against another person and their talent, or you and your success matching up against someone else's success. And it can be just what I see on paper, the way it plays in my mind, with what I see, but like Brandon, me and you playing, I beat you one-on-one. That don't mean I'm better. Like, we all know who is. I might have got lucky. How many times do we have to play to determine it? Because if we play twice and we both win a game, all right, now we tied.
Y'all equals. Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those things. Yeah, I think it comes down to people's preference, and I think a lot of people can't decipher the difference between the most talented player and the best player, or even the best player and the greatest players. I feel like there's even levels to that. Like, greatness is what you do, when the stakes are the highest. You know what I mean? Like, a player like Joel Embiid can be one of the most talented, but what if he doesn't show up in the playoffs when it matters? Paul George being one. Paul George is probably supremely talented. He's probably a top 10 talent in the league, but his performance when it matters has not been good. So you can't consider him a top 10 greatest player in the league right now. His resume don't show.
A lot of people, they definitely confuse that when creating the actual list. Confusing how talented somebody is, what they can do on the court, with how successful they've actually been. T-Mac, one of the most talented players all time. Should he be in the Hall of Fame? If you ask me, no.
Hard take.
I mean, what do you do?
Right. I mean, I guess it's one of those things, and maybe it's because the Hall of Fame in general has become so diluted that the standard is different for the Hall of Fame nowadays, I feel like. So T-Mac probably does earn a spot because of how it's been diluted. But if Hall of Fame was focused on, and it sucks because there's not just an NBA Hall of Fame, it's a Naismith Hall of Fame. So you got dudes in there that didn't really hoop like that in the league, but their college resume is just so, spectacular that they end up making it in somehow. But T-Mac's tough because he didn't do much in his playing career. He does have a finals appearance though. He was 30 seconds away from winning a ring. Yes, he was like the 9th best player on the team. We get that. Yeah.
But if we're just talking about what you could do on the court, he was one of the most talented basketball players I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, that's real. That's real. But it was something that separated him, and maybe it was just greater talent as well. But between like him and Paul Pierce, for example, Paul Pierce wasn't more talented than him, but yet he still got a ring out of it. Showed up in huge moments throughout his career in the playoffs and stuff like that. So that's kind of that difference between like the best and the greatest. Like, Paul Pierce was a greater basketball player than him because he had bigger moments than T-Mac ever did.
Yeah, like if we're ranking them, Paul Pierce gets ranked higher simply on the greatest list. But if we're just talking about talent, who could do more, who was better, putting T-Mac over Paul Pierce.
Right. Shoot, you could even make that conversation with Jordan, for example. Is Jordan the most talented player from top to bottom that we've ever seen in the league?
Yes.
He is. From top to bottom, everything.
Yes.
So all facets of shooting.
Yes.
3-point shooting, layups, dunks, mid-range. Mid-range, yes.
All facets? He is
all facets.
Probably the most complete basketball player. Michael Jordan only shot the three-pointer more than 100 times 4 years in his career. Well, no. Was it 4? It was either 4 or 5 years in his career. Within those years, he shot like 36, 37% between
Trash.
those 4 or 5 years. He never really shot the three like that. Every other year, he might have
That's
been
his fault.
2 for 20, 8 for 40, but he never really shot it. And then you look at it. Okay, let's say I did shoot 3 for 35 one year. How many of those were half court heaves at the end of a quarter?
Don't shoot him if you don't shoot him.
No, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, no, that's rough.
it gets counted as a three. Like, if the ball's moving around and I get it back with 2 seconds left on the shot clock, I gotta get the ball up. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm getting you might get a turnover. Like, you just throw it up. Like, you never know. But when he actually shot the three, out of those years that he actually shot it a lot, considering those times where you shoot it more than once per game on average, he only had 1 year where he really shot bad. Everything else, including that bad year, averaged out to 37%.
Yeah, it's just tough because I feel like his greatness level, because he's number one. I think he's the greatest basketball player ever. I think that gap between the first greatest and the second greatest is bigger than the talent gap itself.
That, yes, I can agree with that. It's just like some people will say Kobe Bryant was more talented because they always say Kobe was more skilled. I don't really know how, but when Michael Jordan crafted his game after somebody, but he surpassed that individual so much so that people don't even know who that guy is. You don't know what's the point of me even saying his name? You're still not going to know who he is. I know who he is. Kobe Bryant crafted his game after somebody that he could not surpass. And even when you look at the numbers, what did he do? He scored more. He took more shots. He missed more shots than anybody in NBA history. He shot maybe 4% less for his career. I think Kobe shot around 45. Jordan is around 49. I just don't like the defensive player of the year, the defensive player of the year award. You look at some of Michael Jordan's steals numbers. I don't care who you playing against. It's hard to get 3.5 steals per game when we're all professionals.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't know what. Like, Kobe was very. What am I trying to say? He was very crafty in the air. Like, there were some things that I saw Kobe do in the air that I didn't see Jordan do. Jordan definitely had a better vertical. So him, jumping was more impressive. But what Kobe did, the way he contorted his body in the air, some difficult shots that he was able to get off over Jordan, which Jordan, a lot of times, he was able to create the space to where the shot was just a little easier. He didn't have to do so much. He didn't force so many bad shots. But I just never saw anything from Kobe that made me think he was more talented than Jordan. And I don't like who, LeBron? No. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
I have to break down LeBron's game? It's just a no for me.
It's because he won games. He won games, more championships.
Wait, what was that?
I said it's because he won more games. Like, because Jordan won more games. That's why, like, you're looking at if the result is better, but also, like, statistically, then there's no way, which I can get. But, like, I remember hearing people say that, like, Kobe's more skilled. I just haven't heard that in a while. And I don't really know what that means. Like, being a Kobe fan and, like, seeing them play, like, they both play different but the same. And I'm talking about, like, MJ, but when it comes to, like, who's better, I feel like I have bias, so I didn't watch Mike play, so I don't. Mike's not my favorite player. I grew up, like, watching Kobe Bryant, and so that's who my favorite player is. But of course, statistically, like, Mike's a better player, and he has more accolades. But yeah, I mean, it's like 1A, 1 One B.
Yeah,
Or not.
and it's tough because I know we always get into, stats. What do the stats look like? And it's hard because you're playing in different eras. You know what I mean? Like the game has just consistently gotten faster and faster, which I think has actually only benefited Jordan's case for being the greatest because look at his numbers. Look at how slow the pace was when he averaged 37. You know what I mean? Like who's averaging 37 now? Harden hasn't even gotten to 37 a game. And everyone's out here scoring 120, 125 a game. You got I don't know what the Bulls scoring average was that year. Couldn't have been more than 100, but he's still scoring 37 a game. Is pretty wild. So we're going to get to the point where there's going to be future players that come along, like a Donovan Mitchell. Where does Donovan Mitchell end up on the all-time scoring list? That's not going to make him better than, not necessarily going to make him better than a Paul Pierce or a Dwayne Wade or guys like that he may pass up along the way. So looking at stats is tough. I try not to put too much stock into it unless you're talking about players from the same era. Then that's fair.
Feel you.
I mean, Devin Booker, what did he put up? 72?
70.
70. Better scorer than Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant never had more than 60.
Hell no. I made the case that KD is the best scorer of all time. Like just in terms of like scoring the basketball, no one has done it better than. Not even talking just statistically, just in terms of just shooting the basketball, no one has done it better than KD on 3 levels.
I agree with that. I think with
Yeah.
just the ability to do so, I would rank Kevin Durant number 1.
Yeah, he's different. He's different. All right, well, y'all got anything else to add on this top 10, or y'all just want to get into this boycott?
No, I'm ready for the nitty gritty.
All right. So let's go on to the NBA boycotting over the past couple days. We're not going to get into all the particulars about, the reason that they're boycotting. If you guys, unless you've been living under a rock, you know what's going on regarding Jacob Blake and, Black Lives Matter movement and all that good stuff. So ultimately, the NBA decided to take a stand and said, we're not going to rock with this anymore. From what I've heard, and you guys can definitely pitch in and tell me what you guys have heard, is ultimately the first game yesterday was supposed to be the Bucks and the Magic. The Magic are actually out on the floor warming up, and the Bucks just never showed up. The Bucks had a press conference, and I think it was George Hill and Sterling Brown were the main two that spoke to the media, saying why they weren't, playing and stuff like that. From what I've heard, there were conversations league-wide about a unified front, and the Bucks may or may not have just gone rogue and decided they were going to do their own thing. But in reaction to, this whole boycott situation, what do you guys take away from this? I know there's a lot to break down.
I think the first thing that should be said is rest in peace, Jacob Blake, despite what's all been speculated. I think the one thing that I can say that nobody can deter me away from is you have other options. I feel like NBA players and just a lot of people within our community will agree with how I feel when I say this. I feel like a lot of times it just comes down to this. When we see what happens with the police encounters or law enforcement encounters with other races, specifically Caucasians, it seems like shooting that individual is the last resort. But when it comes to people who look like me, it's a first priority, second priority, or they just get to that option so much quicker than they do with other individuals. I watched 2 videos earlier today. I watched the man tell a police officer, "I'll effing kill you," pointing at him. How dare you pull a gun on me in front of my child? I'll effing kill you. Nothing happened. See a black man, regardless of what he may or may not have been reaching for, you could have tackled him. There was multiple cops. Like, it was just something else that could have been done. And I feel like, you know, these athletes understand that they have a voice. They're willing to do something about it, regardless of whether it changes something today, a change is made 10 months, 10 years, 50 years from now. At some point, you have to say something. The people who take a greater issue in someone trying to make a change because they don't feel like it's their place to do so, even though they live in this country, they're Americans just like everyone else, they pay taxes just like everyone else. At any given moment, they themselves can have an encounter with the police just like any other individual. We see and hear about athletes getting arrested all the time. If one of them ends up like a Jacob Blake, like a Sean Bell, like a Tamir Rice, at that point, that's when they should say something, or they can never say anything. Like, I just don't get why they can't do something, or why they can't say something, why they can't take advantage of their platform. I applaud them for doing so. I believe I understand why. Even if I wasn't black, it's just an issue that needs to be addressed. Regardless of what the issue is, if we have an issue, it should be addressed. And I applaud them. I agree with it.
Likewise, Carl. Yeah, it's crazy that we're more than halfway through this year and we're still, having this discussion of, police brutality and everything that kind of goes along with it. While you were talking, I was trying to remember, it was me and Barry, we were talking about it earlier, and we were just saying how you're giving the benefit of the doubt to a very particular set of people, groups of people. In other cases, they're not, like we're saying, where it seems like the first or second option, right? We've seen so many videos now that when it comes to arresting or just kind of subduing somebody being allegedly unlawful, when it comes to white people, it's usually somebody that there's not excessive force used to apprehend them, as opposed to when it's black people, So I think people, if you have eyes, right, and you can see, the despair that occurs every day in our country, I think for you to tell somebody to, shut up and dribble and not to be political, people forget that, these games, NBA games are what, 48 minutes, right? NFL games are whatever minutes, so for those 48 minutes, you're an NBA player, but for the rest of your life, you're African American and you're black, and you have to walk around with the knowledge of that you are treated with a different set of skills, a different set of rules. It feels like, in this country, when it comes to police, and I definitely felt like my personal, just like when I'm driving around, I'm definitely more aware of my surroundings, and I'm definitely more aware when, cops are present, but in relations to the league and stuff, I took their hats off to them because, these people, part of the reason why they're even playing is to provide for their family. They're basketball players prior to starting a family. A lot of them have family members. they had mothers and, fathers and other family members they probably needed to take care of too, So um, anytime, somebody's livelihood is in jeopardy, and I think that's what we're ultimately talking about. The livelihood of Black people, able to coexist with a institution that designed currently is designed to well, it's supposed to protect us, but it hasn't been. I was gonna say something more harsh, but no, it's just it hasn't been what it's been for other people, and I think that the world has been given with the pandemic earlier in the year. We had, um, where everybody was home, people were watching way more TV. And you saw what was going on outside, and I think George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, among others, spark that that flame that continues to burn. Um, But we just have to be vigilant. We have to continue to um, stay the course, And people like LeBron James, and other NBA players, kudos to them for using their platform to speak out. Because as long as we assume that role, nothing moves, without they can try, right? You can find people, whatever, but like ultimately, you're not going to have the same type of cachet. You're not going to have the same type of relationship you would have otherwise if you didn't, um, I guess, agree to the terms that the players are establishing. And so I'm glad to see this, especially with the NBA being at the forefront of it. Now, the NFL, we haven't seen, much from them. I don't know if things will slowly start to change, but, that's a different set of team, different set of, it's a different, owners, different set of owners, different set of, rules. The rules can be changed, but yeah, I'm hopeful. You know, I do want to see basketball though. I will say I was like but then you have to realize it's basketball can happen anytime. An opportunity to preserve life. We don't always have that opportunity. So yeah, that's my.
Um, so there is a lot to unpack there from both of you guys. I will say that first and foremost, I am fine with the players deciding to do what they did. I think that people always forget that A, they're human beings. It's always been bigger than basketball for them. It's just the fact that we always see them in the light of the sport that you play, you talking sports, you playing, whatever the case is. Um, so I'm completely on board with them doing that. When they initially stepped out, my first question was kind of, okay, well, what happens after this? Are we talking, postponing the whole season or canceling the whole season? I wanted to figure out what the next plan of action is going to be. I don't know what their list of demands are, and maybe those will start to come out over the next day or so, especially since they've decided to, continue playing. So I think games are going to be hopefully rescheduled for Saturday, and pick everything back up from there. But I do think that the players did the right thing. And I think that it took a lot of balls to do this. People just make it sound like, oh, well, they're millionaires. They just said, we're not going to play. Well, you have plenty of money, whatever. People don't realize that by them boycotting, had the season been postponed, the owners could have said, you know what, let's go scrap this collective bargaining agreement. Let's go back to the bargaining table. We're going to come up with a new agreement. Basically, it could result in money and perks being taken away from the players as a result. So they ultimately did put their money where their mouths are. A lot of these players have donated their time, donated their money to a lot of causes. You've seen a lot of these players marching in the streets before the bubble, came into play. So they've been out there. But I think that they can still expect more from these owners, because even though these players are millionaires, some of them aren't millionaires. You know, some of them are making minimum contracts, which are still less than $1 million for like the young player. Um, but it's the owners that are a part of the real 1% in America. They're the ones that own a professional basketball team. Mind you, to be able to own a team, usually you have other business ventures. You know, Robert Kraft. We know Robert Kraft for, you know, the whole Kraft brand itself. So it's not just him owning the Patriots. So these guys they have a real political pool. They could go call the attorney general for a state. They can call the governor for a state and say, I need you to do this, this, and this, or guess who's not donating to your campaign, you know, when you're up for reelection. Guess who's not going to do this? Well, that's fine. We won't do this. We won't donate here. Like, there's a lot of things that the owners can do if the owners are expected to do it. But I do have to shout out Kyrie, because I think that Kyrie kind of was ahead of the curve on it. He just
Yeah.
kind of said something's not right, something's off. Maybe he didn't pinpoint exactly this, but he was onto something. So I do have to give, you know, Kyrie his due. I know we love to talk about how Kyrie's crazy because he thinks the Earth is flat and has all these, you know, off the wall theories. So
Got the troll people, like,
yeah, yeah. So I know we love to kind of put Kyrie in that box and say, you know, he's just an out there kind of dude, but he was onto something here. And, you know, he set this 2 months ago. And, you know, now here we are today, kind of seeing the stuff that he was talking about. But it took a lot of balls for the players to do this. It still makes me disappointed that a lot of people still don't get what's actually going on. Like, if you click on a post right now from ESPN and read the first 10 comments, it's a lot of people still talking about how Jacob Blake wasn't a martyr. Oh, well, he had a criminal record, blah, blah, blah. Like, people are not realizing it's not even about one person alone. Like, he's just the next in line. But we're talking about 400 years of hurt, ultimately, that has never actually really been remedied. And we've just been expected to move on from it this entire time.
but here's the thing though, Sid, like, and I agree 100% with what you just said. What people don't understand, like, in that moment, did he deserve to play right? You know what I mean? Like, criminals go to jail, they get processed, they serve time, you know what I mean? Like the mass shooters, right? Just like the people who commit heinous crime, they serve time, or depending on what your state is, you know, I don't know who still has like public execution, but I mean, that's like, if that's shouldn't even say that's an option. Like, that should be the case for more people of color, when it's just not. You're just right there, and then it's like we skipped the whole like, all right, let's process you phase, and then we get straight into the, all right, execution, right? And then you have no way to defend yourself, right, in the court of public opinion after your past, right? You have one side saying that this person's criminal because they serve time, you know what I mean? And or because they have priors, or just because whatever, you know, you can fill in the blank. That doesn't mean that they deserve to die. And I feel like people need to get away with saying that, because if somebody graded you on the worst paper you ever wrote in college, you'd be like, well, no, I learned how to write better. Like, I don't, that's not me. You know what I mean? I think that people are very short-sighted in that regard. Um, it shouldn't end with death. It shouldn't end with somebody deciding whether or not this person should live or not when they have the opportunity, right? When they have the opportunity and the means to subdue them, like to act them uh, safely, you know what I mean, or handcuff them.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, and I feel you 100%. I talked to my dad about it earlier today, and I'm not going to go into all the particulars in the video because that's a whole nother rabbit hole as well. But if you watch the video, mind you, the cops already have their guns drawn before he's even walked into the front seat of his vehicle. I don't know why that's the case. You have 3 officers. Do you know if he's armed at that point? Whatever the case is. But they practically escorted him to the front, to the front seat of his vehicle and allowed him to even reach in. So it was basically entrapment. It was basically setting up a situation to where the officers can now say, I fear for my life, so I have the legal right to pull the trigger. They could have easily stopped him from getting to the front seat. Easily. He walked all the way to the other side of his vehicle. Come on, and there's 3 of you. So it's a whole thing, but people don't look at it like that. People just want to look at your record. They want to look at, reportedly there was a knife in the vehicle, whatever. But you know what? Jacob Blake and Karl, I want to either correct you or just bring it to question. As far as I know, Jacob Blake has not died. As far as I know, he's still I don't know if he's in critical condition.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so he is suffering life-altering injuries. From what I heard, he's supposed to be paralyzed from the waist down or something like that now. So
yeah, you shoot a man.
His life has changed forever.
Yeah, like you said, you walk a man from one side of the vehicle to the other, basically. You see how close you are. You didn't have to shoot the man that many times in the back. I've seen much worse and no shootings take place, but the other person was in a completely, he didn't look like me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that part of the problem with fans, or I'm not even calling them fans, because if you're actually fans of these athletes, fans of these sports, you would actually seek to empathize with these players. You would actually want to understand where they're coming from, but people don't care. They care about the product and the service that you're able to provide them. So they care about the entertainment. They don't care about these people at all. But if you actually did, you would seek to empathize with the players. Yes, these players may be millionaires now. They may be in neighborhoods they couldn't afford, when they were younger. But think about, and this is something I'd be interested in, I would love to hear the players share some of their stories, of racism and discrimination coming up, so that you can kind of show that, yes, they are human. Yes, they may not be dealing with some of those same issues now because they're living in these, rich neighborhoods. Some of them actually still are. I heard a story about Vince Carter where he said in the neighborhood he lives in, even when he's walking to the mailbox, he still makes sure to have his ID on him. You know what I mean? Who in that neighborhood is doing that? Just because he doesn't want to get a situation where he gets pulled over and someone pulls up on him and tries to claim he doesn't live in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Your average white person doesn't have to think about those kind of things. In our lives, for example, I don't know if you guys do it, but if I'm walking, on a sidewalk and a white lady is walking past me, I usually go out of my way to make sure that I look as welcoming as I can be. And you're talking close contact for half a second. You know what I mean? But I don't want her to feel threatened. You know what I mean? I don't want her to have to clutch her purse. I don't want her to, turn into a Karen and flip on me and say that I did this, this, and that. There are just a lot of things that, we have to think about just off of the color of our skin. And if you could just, and if you could just think about that and just say, wow, that's crazy that you guys have to actually go through that you guys feel that way. I feel like a lot of these issues will be resolved, but people don't care. People are so caught up in their understanding, their perspective from their lives, and can't even fathom the possibility that someone else goes through something different. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Every morning, I get up, I make a cup of coffee, I put it in my little thermos, I go for a walk every morning. I'm afraid, even there was times where it's nighttime, I have on sweatpants, I have on a sweater, I have my hood up because my head be cold. I go for a jog every time. I'm afraid, or it crosses my mind at the very least, what if somebody, we have a suspicious character, as if people don't jog, as if people don't walk. I just don't know. But I know it's happened. So I know it's a possibility. And I really don't like when people try to make it seem like these athletes have to deal with something even themselves, or they try to, judge them on their lives and their money, or you're rich, So you don't have to deal, well, they might have a cousin, nephew, niece, friend, somebody that has to go, that has to deal with it. And even if they don't, why do I have to know someone directly, or why do I have to deal with something directly to sympathize with another individual?
Yeah.
I don't
And
have to be directly affected by it to feel an effect from it.
yeah,
I
and
don't know.
to piggyback off that real quick, I think some of the biggest changes that we've seen in modern history, things have been able to change when the people that are largely unaffected are just as outraged and jump in and create change. You think the civil rights movement happened only because of Black people? It's just not
Even
the
better
case.
yet, for the people who don't understand what we're dealing with, everybody who cried about 9/11 did not cry about somebody that they personally knew. It was an effect that they felt because of something that happened to our country. It's
Right.
what they define as patriotism, but they just don't understand it when it's something that we feel within our own community. They can't
That's
sympathize.
perfect.
Man, like for some reason you feel like even if you don't sympathize yourself, don't fight against me. If you have an issue of understanding, either try to seek it and lean on somebody else and stop trying to understand it yourself because you're having a difficult time doing it, or just stay out the way. Because the more you try to cause an issue with us trying to resolve an issue, it just makes it much more difficult. I'll give you an example. Gay rights. I may have my opinion on the act, but I'm not going to stop this person who wants to marry someone of their same sex from being able to do so. If you see an issue with the fact that, this was something that took place at one point in time, it's been resolved, they can do it. I'm not sure if they can do it in every single state, but at one point in time, in no state could you marry someone of your same sex, to my knowledge. Somebody took issue with it. Somebody made it a point to have that corrected so that that community could be able to do that. I'm not gonna say no and stand outside and picket against it. I'm not gonna argue with it. If that's something that you want to be able to do, I may have an opinion on it, but go ahead, because I'm not gonna stop you from being able to do that. If you don't like what's going on within our community because we take an issue with the way that we're being treated, just keep your comments to yourself. Stay in the house. Stop tearing down Black Lives Matter signs. Stop interrupting protests. Stop just making it much more difficult for us to have the issue resolved. Because if it is resolved, which it should be, the country itself is just going to be that much more better. You don't like that we're complaining, but you're making it much more difficult for us to resolve the issue so we can end all the complaints. We want it to cease as well, but we can't, because the police brutality won't stop, and we keep arguing with people who just don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's also an issue of, and one thing that bothers me a lot is how people talk about, well, LeBron shouldn't have done this or the players shouldn't have done that, because they're just dividing the country even more. The act of what these players are doing alone is not divisive. That's not dividing the country. All that it's actually doing is holding up a mirror to the nation to show where we're actually at today. This stuff is in people's hearts. So the people that are going against it and saying all lives matter and blah, 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 going against the movement, LeBron doing what he did didn't impact any of that. They already had it in their hearts. They were just waiting for someone to trigger it. That's ultimately what it is. So stop. I don't want to hear, well, the players are being divisive. Doc Rivers is being divisive, blah, blah, blah. That's not the issue. It's just the fact that by me saying it and your reaction is showing that, hey, LeBron is valid in what he's saying. Doc Rivers is valid in what he's saying, because this is America. You guys are just in denial and acting like, LeBron is making you do this. No, nothing that LeBron says is going to make me do anything. I'm choosing to do that. Start to take accountability for where you're at as a person, take accountability for where we are as a nation, and realize that's not right and we got to do better. period. And if you don't want to do that, then that's fine. Don't say anything about it. You don't have to participate in the conversation. You're willingly participating in it.
Something has to happen. I like that we're starting with something, but something got to change.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I mean, and it's a multifaceted issue. Because I mean, even as we're talking just police brutality and police relations, that's just that's one twig on the entire tree. You know what I mean? There's so much more. It all kind of comes from the same root, being racism, discrimination, prejudice, all that. But we got so many different issues, the discrimination that Black women, face, whether you're talking about in the workplace or even this whole Megan Thee Stallion situation is kind of showing the issue of Black women, kind of being underrepresented and disrespected to an extent. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole we can get into off air or something like that. But there's a lot of, if you're a part of this movement, just realize this is one stop. We got 20 more stops to make. And you know what? This isn't just going to end one day. So it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, but something definitely has to change. There definitely needs to be more action. I am proud of the number of people, whether it's other people of color, whether it's white people that have hopped on and tried to find ways to contribute to an overall solution, even one that may not affect them the same way that it affects, us as Black men, especially. I appreciate the efforts, but more has to be done. It's going to have to go to the point where some of these congressmen, we're going to have to start to limit congressman terms. You can't be in Congress for 30 years and be a racist. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not doing any good for our nation. Like, got people that have been in Congress since, the crack epidemic in the 80s. You know what I mean? And they thought that was just fine, and they've still been in office. So it's a deeply rooted issue, and it's going to take some time, but as long as we just continue to take steps toward a solution and not just, get riled up every single time something happens and then let it die out.
That reminds me, Sid, I was speaking to Taylor Kimber the other day, and she was telling me how, I had some questions for her about, the Biden Kamala Harris pick and stuff like that. And I just had like some other questions about her, like politically. And she told me if we ever wanted like have a forum. Well, she said like for you, she knows that you do straight out of Fresno, like leading up to the election. You ever wanted to have a forum where it was her and then I don't know, Sarah Hayes, but they run the Fresno, I think Democrats. And maybe have like well, it'd probably be difficult to do like public thing, but just if we even just have like a a giant webinar, informing people and speaking big and just that sort of thing, just having like almost like a town hall where certain people can voice their opinion, but more so just like educating people, giving people the opportunity to ask questions. And so, like a lot of our issues would be resolved if we were more informed. A lot of people don't act because they feel like they're making an ill-informed decision. So, just something to throw out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Man, I'm already drained talking about this whole boycott situation. It's been a lot to take in over the past, few days since the Jacob Blake shooting. Um, it's just unfortunate that somehow we end up being in this same spot, and you get to the point where you start to feel helpless. You know what I mean? Like, is this ever going to change? Um, at what point is everyone going to be, equally outraged about, these kind of situations? When can we move forward as a nation? It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So I definitely, pray for pray for you guys for, you know, strength and the ability to persevere through this whole thing. Because, you know, as just as we're seeing every day, and we've known, obviously, as young Black men, being Black in America isn't easy. You know, we don't, and even then, we don't even really complain about it too much. We've been trained to, you know, push forward. We've been equipped with kind of knowing that we're always going to have to put out 10 times more to get to the same spot. You know what I mean? So we're not opposed to the hard work, but at the same time, you know, this isn't about hard work. This is about preserving life. You know, it's much bigger than that. So hopefully we can see. What'd you say, Carl?
Yeah, it's a completely different argument at this point, or a completely different, you know, conversation, a dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, man, hopefully I'll just continue to pray and hope that people can open their eyes to it somehow. I can't I can't convert people though, so I can't be, you know, on the Facebook comments, you know, going back and forth for an hour, you know, about, you know, why Black Lives Matter isn't a terrorist, you know, terrorist statement and all this stuff. But, you know, y'all got anything else to add on this?
Arrest the police who shot Breonna Taylor.
Yes,
Or
yes. I don't get what the holdup is. I don't get it.
and Elijah McClain.
And Elijah McClain.
Yes,
Yep.
I was trying to remember his name. Yes, Elijah McClain as well.
Yeah. So man, I don't want to see more people added to the list, man. I want to get to the point where we have to stop saying justice for Breonna Taylor because the government is doing their job to ensure that that's a thing. You know, once you know people start getting arrested and held accountable, we're not going to be protesting in the streets because justice will be on our side. That's all we want. That's ultimately all we want. We're not asking for extra stuff. We're not asking for everyone to wear Black Lives Matter shirts and do all this, you know, kind of publicity ploy and stuff. We just want people to be held accountable for their actions is what it comes down to. So yeah. So yeah, I mean we'll leave it there. I did want to say before we wrap up, I don't know who it was, but some people have been still listening to our episodes and watching episodes while we were out on hiatus. A lot of people actually. So we do appreciate you guys. I believe we're over 1,500 views and listens on all of our platforms now, and that like skyrocketed. That like damn near doubled from where we were when we left for hiatus. So appreciate y'all checking out, you know, old episodes and old content and all that. Continue to, you know, share the podcast with people, you know, like, follow, subscribe, you know, wherever you check us out at. And yeah, just thank you. Yeah, we got more content coming for you guys. So
I would clap.
Yeah. All right. Well, y'all got anything else to add?
That's a wrap.
It's a wrap.
Hey.
All right. What'd you say, Carl? Brandon?
I said we appreciate all the fans and the listeners.
Yeah. All right. Till next time, y'all.
Love y'all.
Peace. Love y'all too.
Amen.